Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well on this Wednesday, 11 October 2023. We meet today to talk crypto, to talk BTC, to talk macro. We have quite a few things to see, so we'll start right away. And I remind you that you have the educational course which is available for free, which is training of more than 60 hours, 130 videos, 400 pages of guides to teach you crypto, blockchain, trading, technical analysis, investment through videos, tests, everything to be able to progress. It's available for free if you get financed by our partner. Everything is in description and comment. And we start right away with the continuity of the discussions around Bitcoin. Yesterday I spoke to you about a new white paper which proposed the execution of smart contracts, in any case the equivalent on BTC, or in any case next to BTC, without having to modify Bitcoin. And there we have a speech which comes from Botanics Lab, which itself offers a solution called the Spider Chain to interface Bitcoin in the VM. That is to say, the Ethereum virtual machine where we execute the Ethereum smart contracts. They go further by defining that Bitcoin needs Ethereum, and in particular its virtual machine, to be able to open. And what is normal is that for them they define a project that allows them to do so. Obviously, everything that revolves around it will be rejected. And what is interesting is that we have a little squabble that is going on between the different processes, whether it is the BIP 300, which is the proposal on Bitcoin 300, which allows us to be able to build what we call side chains, the equivalent of everything that revolves around Ethereum, for example, on Bitcoin, but you have to modify Bitcoin to be able to do it, in which inevitably there is a confrontation, which is relatively strong. The goal is not to have Bitcoin like Ethereum, it is to really have an identity specific to Bitcoin. So we have the maximalist BTCs, which are rather against, and alongside we have other projects which allow the creation of a chain to interface with Ethereum, or yesterday's project, which allows to build smart contracts alongside Bitcoin and interface directly with Bitcoin. So we still have quite a few emulsions that are being made. And wouldn't that be a narrative for the next bull run? It's up to you to tell me what you think in the comments. In any case, we're following it closely, I can assure you. Closely next to it, what is clearly followed is Binance and its CEO CZ, particularly in Brazil. Afterwards, there are drinks all over the world in which Binance is more or less faced with trials, particularly since there is the Binance US trial. This is also the case in Brazil, which goes even further. A 500-page report to explain to us that Binance is a huge Ponzi pyramid. To put it simply, and this is a little bit what follows from it, they go a little further. They explain that Binance is not trying to enter into the notion of compliance, that they will have asked to stop the trading of future, and they did not do it, etc. So we still have Binance, which is in bad shape at the moment, which is rather classic because we are at the end of the bear market. We are in the period of lethargy to prepare for the future, so it is the period which is the most complicated if you haven't broken down before. That's when you shouldn't break down. And Binance is precisely one of the remnants, let's say, of the FTX and Alameda era. And we are in the middle, precisely, of SBF's trial in relation to that, so it is very complicated, particularly with the allegations by Caroline Ellenson, who was the CEO of Alameda Research, which was the trading company which precisely supported FTX, who clearly says that SBF told her to commit the crimes and that it was SBF who was thirsty for capital. So on that, Caroline, we've known the beast for a while, we followed it well during the Alameda era, and we went a little further when things started to heat up, and clearly here we are in a form of discard. I think that it is just as guilty as SBF. It's just that SBF will be completely loaded. In any case, what is certain is that Alameda really helped with the bull run of 2021. As a reminder, they had mined $38 billion, while the question arises on whether that they really had the capacity to take on these $38 billion in assets. So if we look at Alameda, we will say no, but if we look at Alameda plus the door, which allowed you to type at FTX, obviously they had them, and that's where it was an element which could have already alerted people, but in this case they were very happy to have something that threw $38 billion into the crypto market in full bull run. And to continue on SBF, we have here the proposal from the SBF lawyer, who explains that for them they have a company called Anthropic, which is based on artificial intelligence, which could precisely reimburse all of the users of FTX, and that overall it is not all to make the negative that there were many companies that operated in the empire, and that the goal was not always to set up companies to operate FTX, it was really to create added value. And in particular, it pushes the idea of Anthropic, and the idea that Anthropic could precisely make it possible to reimburse all of FTX's creditors. To see, in any case, it is a defense on the legal part and not the economic part. In terms of the calendar, today we have the appearance of the 20 celebration. I remind you that it is an important element. Although it is a report, it still really gives us the key elements of the discussions that were held. The element that the market is clearly waiting for is Thursday, 12 October, tomorrow CPI 1430. Therefore, inflation, which looks gently and tenderly at our oil opinion, to see if we are going to do our retest. For the moment, we have had a period of consolidation, but we have not sought the very important gap. There, we have an indication which tells us that we are not going to look for the gap straight away, because there, when we have a gap this close, this low, and we have a day of consolidation, generally, we will go get her. If this week, in fact, we are not going to look for the gap, that implies that we are really going to blow this retest and go for much higher. For the moment, we are still potentially in an acceleration, that is to say, looking for the retest and then sinking. Clearly, tensions in the Middle East play a big role in oil, but this plays much less for several reasons. It's because we have a confrontation that is accelerating. The tension is already high, okay? Understand that it is not just the conflict between Israel and Hamas. There is everything that revolves around it, and the power games which are already in strong tensions and which have already been priced by the market. So I think that explains a little bit the low tension that we can have in terms of oil. We should have had an acceleration too. This is not the case in any case, which is rather positive for inflation and inflation figures, which will arrive in a few days. We attack with the SPF 500. As for it still pushing very hard, we have almost done our retest. We are still not far away. We have still reduced half of the candle. So that means that we are arriving, really, in a zone of shortness of breath. So here we're going to see if we can really get our retest at 4,434. There we will have a very good opportunity to provide bearish support for a downward trend. Again, first impulse, retracement, second impulse, retracement, third impulse. With target 1 and 1.1, we are used to the SPF 500. This is something that is rather classic. And if we look at the retracement, I also think that we are not bad. That's it. We've reached 0.5, hence the fact that we have here. Hop, we're just going to put it back. The fact that we have a redemption of the wick, on the other hand, the 618 on the retest, there we still have a nice confluence, therefore a nice price call on these areas, because we have several indicators that come into it, whether it is liquidity, whether it is structural retesting, or whether it is a retest on a classic Fibonacci zone. BTC, we are going to retest the EMA 50, rather classic on the CME, in which we swallowed almost the entire weekly candle. We will have to monitor the weekly close, because there it could really be a big signal for a very strong bearish acceleration. In any case, the fact of going to retest is rather positive. It means that there we could have a very good support to restart the rise for those who are rather bald, for those who are rather in a downward trend continuity, which is specific to the ranging in which we are to go, and retest the 25,000, which is rather the scenario that I favor. It will be the break which will make us return between the 50 and the 200, rather classic. When we look at the level here of the RSI, we see that we are very much in a momentum which is in the process of weakening, which is rather symptomatic of a bearish acceleration to come, or in any case of a compression of the momentum to have an acceleration, whether bullish or bearish, although the bearish breakout always remains in the idea, because we have an SP 500 which is pushing, as we have seen. Here we can clearly see that it is accelerating on the rise. We have a BTC which unfortunately breaks on the downside. We return to crime, in which we can clearly see that it is the total opposite of what we can see at the level of the SP 500. That will happen if the SP 500 accelerates sharply downward with bearish continuity. We will have pressure on risky assets and therefore necessarily on BTC. Even if we have a decrease in correlation, it will play a huge role. At the level of the breakout, we see that we have indeed sought the equity of this zone, which is rather classic. And we see that we are in the process of potentially retesting the high zone, range, but which for me is not yet validated, so we are really still in the middle. And it is very important to note it. It is even more visible when we spend an hour. In 1 hour, we see that we did our retest here. We made the breakout. We rebounded here. Bearish acceleration on the rejection. So what we had explained yesterday precisely, and we went to find what? The liquidity of this area, behind a buyout which is in the process of being carried out. The question we will see is, can we consolidate above? So by implication, I'm re-entering, I'm making a rebound. There, we will have a nice little signal to try to accompany the course a little. A minimum to go and find that area. Potentially see this whole liquidity zone here, if we ever get that. On the other hand, if we have a bullish acceleration with bearish rejection, there we will have a zone of bearish acceleration. To get what? To get the obligatory 1 and 1.1 objectives, and ideally the 1.618, 25,974, so we'll say 26,000, to get the liquidity zone that was left there. So here we are rather in something classic, And what is interesting to see is that in particular in the order flow, we have a small increase in open interest, which is taking place on an acceleration of shorts, which is rather classic, but we still have an increase in longs. Okay, we see that here on all the accounts we are in the process of buying back. Here on the top traders we are flat. So that implies that there is a form of repurchase agreement because we have a price which is falling, therefore implying positions which are falling, and therefore if we have here a percentage of the position which is mostly still flat, this implies that we have a form of repurchase which is carried out to fill in. It's not really significant, okay, so be careful there. We don't have real decision-making at the order flow level, but we have small indications that potentially if we continue to fall, we could start to buy back, and the purchase zone is not yet reached. So for me, we take a little step back. We would have here a retest, which will be important if we ever re-enter. Here in this high range, so really the bearish range zone, so that implies that we make a breakout and we re-enter here. There, I think we are going to have, the further we go down into the bottom of the range, a period of acceptance and a period of purchase. So people will no longer buy in the 25,300 with perhaps a descent to 25,000 until we will say 25,800. I think that this is where we will really have a zone where we will have levers which will be put in place on the chain of the long to simply reaccompany the upper part. We don't forget that we are not in a period of flow, we are still in a period of range. For that, the best way is to zoom out. We look, what do we see? We see here hop, a big range. We therefore see there obviously small ranges which are set up, and obviously we are still in this big range. We have no flow, we have no structure of the flow, therefore we always pay close attention to our positions because as long as we don't break the range, it implies that we will go for the bottom and then go for the top and so on. It's very simple in terms of structure as long as we mentally hold on because we always tend to want to see trends when this is not necessarily the case. And therefore we protect ourselves, especially when we look at the level of liquidity at the level of Kingfisher. Clearly we are trying to create liquidity on the upper part in which we have recreated a liquidity pulse. So who are the shorters that we saw at the level of open interest between 27,500 and overall 28,200? All the liquidity that we left waiting that I showed you in the graph earlier. On the other hand, what is really important to note is that we have the perpetual which is in the process of collapsing. So here we have the bullish acceleration which corresponds to the perpetual in which we have a CVD which is sinking at the level of the spot. So we are in a form of manipulation for me, a bearish continuity to seek the reintegration of the range and break the bearish, which is what I have already been explaining to you for several weeks. In terms of liquidity on CoinGlass, we can clearly see the strengthening of the shorts present. We went looking for the longs here. And we have a little bit of longs which are being built following the delay here. Really the delay. And that's why I'm telling you that if we're ever going to retest this part and then go deeper, we'll have a long reconstruction to speed up the movement, which is quite simple. I would like to point out two things to you because it is important and I forgot to talk about it yesterday because the video was already too long. BTC currently in the short term is in the process of to break in fact lower than we are relatively solid on the weekly on the other hand, on the total market cap therefore, which represents all of the cryptos we see that we are in a compression phase which is more solid and that we are heading towards the lower part of this compression. If we ever break this level, if we break 974, that implies that the first stop will be 857. So that means that we are going to have a drop which will be very violent, and we see that we have a compression at the level of the RSI which is very strong, which is much stronger than that of Bitcoin. So that means that we have all the other cryptos which are also currently in trouble, and so we are in the process of stabilizing the momentum here to have a new acceleration of the momentum, whether this is the decline or the rise, and so we will really have to monitor because I think in the coming weeks we will have a response which will be very strong. And I think that when we arrive to retest this area, that is where we will have our feedback. Especially when it comes to dominance. What's going on? We have a very nice rebound that is happening, so that implies that we really have a beacon that is regaining momentum. Wouldn't this be a narrative that would bring us back to the upper part here with mainly everything that is happening on BTC? It is regaining developers on BTC, the solutions around BTC, namely that it was a little bit gloomy with the previous bull run. There we will have something that could work on it, and that will be the subject that we will deal with in the video on Saturday. I really invite you to prepare yourself because it's going to be heavy as usual and a different image from what we can experience in terms of the different bull runs, and that's Saturday. In any case, we have meets up later at 13:30 to talk about Chainlink's crypto.